Okay, so let's start talking about our nerves and our spinal cord now. So on this image here, we're seeing the nerves come off of the spinal cord. The one thing I want to explain here is the difference from a plexus and a spinal nerve. So a plexus is going to be a branching network of intersecting nerves. So you'll see here at the top in the neck area here, these are called your cervical plexus. So remember, your landmark here is called your cervical area. And so these are your cervical plexus. Then you have the nerves going down towards the arm, right here, that I'm circling in red. These are going to be your brachial plexus. Because remember, your arm is called the brachial. So this interwoven network of nerves coming from the spinal cord towards the arm is called the brachial plexus. And then here you'll see coming off right in the chest area, you have thoracic nerves. So these are not called a plexus because there's only one coming off at a time. There's not an interwoven network. So in this area where I'm circling now, that area is called, the nerves in this area is called your thoracic nerves. So again, up in the neck area, these are your cervical plexus going towards the arm. So all of this right here would be your brachial plexus. And then right here in the chest area would be your thoracic nerves. Okay, so now let's erase that and go to our next picture. Okay, so in this picture, if I say identify number 1, you would say cervical plexus. Identify 2, you would say brachial plexus. Identify 3 would be your thoracic nerves. Identify 4, this is going to be in your lumbar area, so this is your lumbar plexus. Identify 5 is going to be in the sacral area, and this is going to be your sacral plexus. Now you can group 4 and 5 together. So if I have a bracket there from here to here, and I say identify this one, and we'll call this one 6. 6 would be your lumbosacral plexus, because you've just combined 4 and 5 into one grouping. So again, 1 here would be your cervical plexus. 2 would be your brachial plexus. 3 would be your thoracic nerves. 4 would be your lumbar plexus, and 5 would be your sacral plexus. And then 4 and 5 together in one group would be your lumbosacral plexus. Okay, let's go down to our next image. Okay, so in this image here, we're seeing some more nerves that you're responsible for identifying on the practical. So on the arm, towards the thumb side, remember your thumb rotates. So this is going to be your radius bone towards the thumb side. So radius is going to be on the thumb side. So this is your radial nerve. Towards your pinky side, this is going to be where the ulnar bone sits, the ulna. So this is going to be your ulnar nerve. And going down the very center of the forearm is going to be your median nerve. So on thumb side is your radial nerve. Pinky side is the ulnar nerve. And straight down the middle is going to be your median nerve. Then you'll see here you have the sciatic nerve. This is the very, very large nerve that goes down the back of the leg. And then you have the femoral nerve. And the femoral nerve is going to sit right there on top of the femur. So make sure you can also identify those nerves. Now going to our next picture. If you remember from when we were talking about the brain, you had 3 meningeal layers. You had the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. you have those three meninges also in or around the spinal cord. So they'll just go from the brain all the way down the spinal cord. And you'll see in this picture here, you can identify the tough mother. Remember, duramater is tough mother. So the duramater here is this tough outer layer right here. That's the duramater. Your arachnoid mater is going to be in the middle. So it looks like a spider webbed structure. And then your pia mater, which means soft mother, is going to be sitting on the very interior. Oh, I don't know why I put 4 there. Sorry about that. That's going to be a 3. On the inside, touching the spinal cord itself. So make sure you can identify all 3 of these meningeal layers. Your duramater on the outside, your arachnoid mater on the middle, and then your pia mater on the inside. Okay, so erase that. Okay, and the rest of these structures we're going to talk about on the model themselves. Okay, so let's stop sharing that picture and we'll go into the models. Okay, so the first model we're going to be looking at is this one right here, and this is a model of our spinal cord. Make sure you can see that real well here. Okay, so this is going to be the vertebrae. So all this bony structure around the spinal cord is going to be the vertebrae. And then your spinal cord is going to sit in that cavity that is formed in the center of the vertebral column. So here you're seeing the spinal cord. Now you have roots that bring the sensory nerves to the spinal cord, and a root that takes the motor neurons away from the spinal cord. So this big thick one going towards the back, so you'll see it enters in the back. This is the dorsal side. You can see because you have your spinous process of your vertebrae here. So this is going to be the dorsal side, which means this one is going to be the anterior or ventral side. So this thick root that comes in towards the back of the spinal cord is called your dorsal root. Your dorsal root is going to bring sensory nerves from the peripheral nervous system into the spinal cord. Then leaving the spinal cord, going out this skinny root right here. This skinny root, you'll see it here and here, is going to be the ventral root. So dorsal root and then the ventral root. You can always identify the dorsal root because you have this swelling here. This is where the cell bodies will accumulate and form a little swollen area. This is the dorsal root ganglion. Again, so the skinny root is the ventral root. The one in the back with this swollen area, this is the dorsal root. And this swollen area is called the dorsal root ganglion. Okay. Now let's talk about the 3 layers that we've already identified, the 3 meninges. So this outer one here is called the duramater. The next one here is called the arachnoid mater. And then the one that is covering the spinal cord itself is the pia mater. Okay, so again, duramater. This middle one here is arachnoid mater. And then your pia mater, which surrounds the spinal cord itself. So this space in here would be your subarachnoid space. Okay. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, so now let's talk about the spinal cord itself. So in the spinal cord, you have your white matter. So all of this in here that you can see is more white, that's the white matter. And this that is the darker tan, this is the gray matter. And it looks like a butterfly. So you can see this looks like one wing of the butterfly. This looks like the other wing of the butterfly. and right here you see where the butterfly's body would be. So all of this butterfly portion is going to be your gray matter. Okay. You have this hole in the center here. So that hole is called the central canal. That's where your cerebral spinal fluid will flow. You'll see you have an indentation in the back and an indentation in the front. The indentation in the back, this is called your posterior. That's towards the backside. Median, because it's right in the middle. Sulcus. So posterior, median, sulcus. This larger indentation in the front is called your anterior median fissure, because a fissure is larger than a sulcus. So again, in the backside, your posterior median sulcus. In the front part, you have your anterior median fissure. Okay. Now in the white matter, you're going to divide it into 3 columns. So back here towards the backside, this is going to be your posterior white column. Then over here, this is going to be your lateral white column. And then up here, you have your anterior white columns. So where my finger is, posterior white column, lateral white column, all of this, and anterior white column. Now in the gray matter, we have horns. So instead of columns, we have horns. So this one and this one here is going to be your posterior gray horn, your lateral gray horn, and your anterior gray horns. Okay, so posterior gray horn, lateral gray horns, and anterior gray horns. So if I have a sticker right here and I say, so right here, and I say, identify this general area or this large area, it's going to be white matter. If I say identify this specific area, I'm asking which column this is. So this would be, this specific area would be our posterior white column. And then the same thing on our gray matter. If I point to here and I say identify this general area or this large area, you're going to say gray matter. But if I say identify this specific area, you're going to say posterior gray horn. Okay, so again, general means your white matter versus your gray matter, white matter versus gray matter. And then specific areas are going to be which gray horn or which white column. Okay. Let's see what else we need to do on here. Okay, so we've seen the dorsal roots here, the ventral roots here, they're going to come off together. And so right here would be your spinal nerve. And then it's going to separate. You'll have an extension going off towards the dorsal part. So this extension coming off here is called the dorsal ramus. This large extension here, which will curve around and go towards the ventral side, is going to be the ventral ramus. So dorsal ramus, ventral ramus, and then you have 2 that come off of the ventral ramus. These are our Rami communicants. Okay, Rami communicants. Okay, our Rami communicants are going to divide into 2. You have the one closest to the spinal cord. This is called your gray ramus, or gray communicants, I'm sorry, gray communicants. And then the one furthest is called the white communicants. So both together are your Rami communicants. And this one is your gray communicants, and this one is your white communicants. Okay, so now we're taking those areas where we saw those colored lines, and we're going to talk about them here in this drawing. Make sure you can identify them on the model that we just did. So on this model here, make sure you can identify each of those colored lines, but you also need to know them on the picture like you're seeing here on the screen. Okay, remember that all of your sensory neurons are coming in through your dorsal root. So both of these are going to be sensory nuclei here, coming in the back posterior horn of the gray matter. And then your information will leave through the ventral root. So these are going to be your motor nuclei in the ventral root. So you know that these back two right here are going to be sensory. Let me get a different color here. Should have done that before. And then these two that are towards the anterior side are going to be your motor. Okay, so your motor is going to leave through the ventral root. Whoa, sorry about that. My pen kind of got away from me. Okay, so again, your sensory information from the peripheral nervous system is going to come in through the dorsal root. The information will get processed in either the spinal cord or the brain. And then the processed information will then send a signal out through the ventral root. So through the ventral root are going to be your motor nuclei. Your sensory and your motor nuclei can be divided into somatic or visceral. So somatic is going to be going to your skeletal muscles, your skin, and then your visceral is going to be going to the guts. So to your heart, to your stomach, to your bladder, okay? So your somatic is going to be towards the outside and your visceral is going to be towards the inside because, of course, your skin and muscles are towards the outside of the body and the guts are towards the inside. And visceral, the slang for visceral is guts, okay? So now let's go through these. I'm going to get me a different color pen here. Okay, so this one, number 1, you know that it is sensory because it's closer to that dorsal root. So that means it's sensory. And then it's towards the outside of the two that are in this red circle. So it's going to be somatic. So sensory somatic nuclei. And then number 2 here, it is still coming in from this dorsal root. So we know it's going to be sensory, but it's towards the inside of the gray matter, so it's going to be visceral. So it's sensory visceral nuclei. Now let's go down to the ones that are closer to the ventral root. Number 3 here is closer to the ventral root, so it's going to be motor nuclei, but it is more to the inside of the gray matter, so it's going to be visceral. So it's going to be motor visceral nuclei, or visceral motor nuclei. And then number 4 here is going closer to the ventral root, so it's going to be your motor nuclei, and of the motor nuclei, it's going to be somatic. So it'll be somatic motor nuclei, okay? Usually you say the somatic and visceral first, and you say the sensory or motor second, okay? But be sure you can identify these from this drawing and from that model that we went over earlier.